Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Enhancing Your World show. I'm your co-host, Chris Alba. Larkin's going to be joining us shortly, so I'm looking forward to today's show. It's going to be an action-packed one. We're going to talk about trauma today, and it's become such a buzz, and there's so many experts that talk about what's trauma, and how to deal with it and how to heal from it and how to grow through it. And we're going to be providing some awareness from our points of view of, you know, um, being able to grow through the challenges of life. What is trauma? What is a challenging experience? What's abuse? We're going to cover these topics today. So, pretty wild one, and everybody's got their points of view, and everybody has their perspectives. I myself would never consider myself an expert on most subjects, even though I've been working within these realms of mental and emotional and behaviors of humanity for over 20 plus years, working as a coach, guide, healer, and working through my own stuff. And that's the only thing that I could truly say as far as what am I an expert of, and it's my own experience, because it's the only thing that I can both internally be aware of, as well as reflect that externally based on the teachings of others. And I think it, um, trauma is a challenging thing. There's different types of trauma and different things, and I'm sure we've all had some form of experience that created an instant loss, a traumatic loss, a loss of a loved one, loss of an identity, loss of possessions, things like that. Something that we sometimes feel like it happened to us rather than for us. And, when we can use the power of our intellect, use the power of our minds to question with curiosity our experiences that have happened up to this point, and learn how to alchemize those things by identifying what we can do about it. We can gain an awareness of how to grow through our own processes, our own behaviors, our own responsibilities, walking in authenticity. The challenge with all these things when we're teaching how to be authentic. Like, I don't know what your authentic self is. Only you can be aware of that. I can observe it through my own observations, through my own discernment, through my own judgments, through my own experiences. But that is my own level of awareness, my own level of consciousness, observing something. And whether I see it as good, bad, and different, that's my work. And that's what I'm trying to illuminate through these podcast series or video vlogs, or whatever you want to call them. And through my daily practice is of walking with others. So, there's Larkin. Hi, Larkin.
There we go. Can you hear me?
There it is. There we are.
All right, I'll be on camera in a few minutes. Oh my God. I need a computer person. My computer gets on a screen that I can't even It's like half off screen. It's the wrong size. I don't know what happened to my laptop, but it is a mess.
Did you have an update?
We updated it, but you know what? I don't know. I might be taking a trip to Best Buy to talk to the Geek Squad. It's
Right.
driving me nuts. So
I
your whole
know.
life comes crashing down when it stops working well.
Yeah. Well, when you base your life off of the technology, right?
Yep.
So yeah, definitely. And definitely something to think about. I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. I've just been chatting for a few minutes on the concept of what trauma is from my perspective or my awareness, and how to use what questions to identify, what happened and what we can do about it, and how to be about it. So, or grow through it. So that's basically all I've really shared today, just to kind of catch you up. And what are your thoughts?
No, I think that's great. I think that what I've been doing this first week in April with my mindset clients and even some of my reading clients is basically the same thing. I've been talking to them about how we identify what we go through.
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of people, that means trauma, and asking them to focus on questions, like you were just saying.
Right.
It's the questions that you ask yourself, not so much the answers that you're getting. And again, this comes up time and time again in our conversation on here, Chris, and I think probably with both of our clients is, what are we, it's all pretty simple. As a human being, all this stuff really boils down to mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And what are we programmed with? So if we are programmed, everybody, I find each younger generation seems more and more identified with more dramatic labels. And so you hear everybody walking around, even high schoolers, talking about trauma. And right. So what really is trauma, and how is that a different identification than what it was maybe 50 or 100 years ago? And how do we handle it differently? And I think a good example that I brought up with my coaching clients last week was, my grandfather was in World War II. He was a Seabee, so he literally rebuilt bridges and ships and things while they were being blown up. He was, he dealt with everything from prisoners of war to, having enemy soldiers hold guns at his face. And, he was a good-hearted person, but what trauma did that leave him with? He ended up having to leave the Navy because he was on a ship that exploded while he was on it. And wow. One of his friends and colleagues literally fell from the top deck, landed on him, dead. His dead body landed on him, and the ship was exploding under him. So he had a metal rod, I believe it was, go all the way up through his leg. He was pinned to the ship. And this is how, this was his, last day on duty, basically. Okay. The man came home. He raised 2 boys. He held a job. He had a happy, healthy marriage. He had a very, very full and happy life. Now, what he went through in private, I don't know. I know he always got up at 5 a.m. But that was kind of how they were raised to be anyway. Mm-hmm. So, you never heard him. He was never on anti-anxiety meds. He never went out through therapy or counseling. He didn't go into any healing modalities. He came home and went about his life.
Right.
So this is not me putting down people that are having a greater trauma response, but I want to put some things into perspective. How we are raised and how we are taught to handle ourselves in difficult times, and what we are taught is life, and that we just have to keep moving on and do the best we can and focus on serving others, is very different than a world that we're in today, that literally before you're the age of 6, you're taught that perhaps you're having a trauma response, go hide in your room, get on technology, you don't have to go to school or work today because you're having a hard time. And what I want to kind of share here is that I feel like our world today has it all backwards. We think by saying it's okay, you're having a hard day, you don't have to go to school, why don't you just stay home and take care of yourself? That what we're doing is we're helping that person or that child.
Right.
But it seems as though, hi, Mark Thomas. I think what's important is to realize that we really have it ass backwards.
Right.
When we teach our children, when we teach people in our society how to collect ourselves and handle ourselves and move forward, instead of, sitting around and feeling sorry for ourselves or stepping out of our lives because we're going through trauma, we're actually helping and empowering that person. And we've been doing the opposite, because my grandfather died at 95. He wasn't poor and on the street and divorced and depressed and whatever. He was he lived a full and happy and successful life,
Right.
despite what he went through. And yet I have had clients who were in the military. Maybe they went overseas, but they never even saw action. And mind you, guys, I'm not putting anybody down here. I just want us to put things into perspective. These are, I had a couple guys who went overseas who never saw action. They were never off base camp. They were never in what they would title, personal one-on-one danger. Yeah, they were in a bomb zone. But I mean, I'm just saying, like, they were leaving the military early because they couldn't handle it.
Right.
They came home and were on tons of medications. They couldn't hold a job. They were depressed, and really nothing had actually happened to them. So I'm inviting and asking you guys to take a look at, in your life, what do you identify as trauma? What is it really? And, really put into perspective. Maybe you have to strip things down and say, because you don't want what you're identifying as trauma to completely stop your life.
Right.
And I'm not expecting everyone to be like my grandfather, but it is a lot of how we are raised and what we are taught is trauma. And then what we're taught we have to do about it. When we move on with our lives, that's our radical responsibility to make sure that we don't allow what we identify as trauma to stop our lives. And
Right.
there's a lot more where this came from, but that's what I want to summarize and really talk about today.
Okay.
And this got everybody going. All right.
Right. Using an outside source, I really like the teachings of Gabar Mate. I find his teachings pretty compassionate. And as somebody that leads, holds himself as an expert, to some standard, he seems very humble, and he's willing to be compassionate, and also, say, this is where I've made my mistakes. This is what I could have done better. Now that I've shifted, perspectives, or seen it from a different light, him being a workaholic and being fried all the time, trying to provide for his family and things like that, and how he handled his relationships in his life. And, the thing that, he says about trauma is it's an invisible force that helps change our life, right? It shifts
Yes.
our reality in some way. And, that could be a car crash. That could be, you got robbed. It could be a death. It could be, all these various different things, because it creates an immediate awareness of the both polarities of unconditional love. You can, lose a loved one and be grateful that they're no longer suffering and pain, but you're still missing that person. Their embrace, or their touch, or their conversations, or those types of things. And I think that's normal. I think that's human, to be able to hold that duality, and like you said, not shut down, completely, for months, years, whatever because of one experience, and to be compassionate. I try not to judge other people's experiences, of course, because what they're going through is what they're going through. At the same time, there's always a question of, well, how are you gonna be when those things come up? But then what are you gonna do about it? Like if we're giving our power away to outside forces, it disempowers the individual will, right? You know, and having that, having that, having that, I guess, awareness or, whatever, it's, well, what are you going to do about it? Like that happened. Okay. Great awareness that it happened. Now, how can we heal from that? How can we grow from that? How can we move in the highest vibration for ourselves and our collective? Because it is about service. I mean, the people that go to war, they're going to war because they're being of service to a system and they're getting compensated for it. I mean, I don't think most people in the military would go to war, and a lot of the friends that I've had go to war, they're like, we were just over there helping the people, the powers to be, make more money. Mm-hmm. And that's where they got disenchanted, like right. that trauma of like, they had this idea of, I'm going to be of service. I'm going to be protecting my nation. I'm going to be helping. And then they find out a new reality of like, oh wait, this is really about some kind of level of control,
right,
of the people. That in itself could be traumatic, right? Because it shocks you through feeling like you've been lied to or betrayed. And then, they do get home and then they feel abandoned, by the very establishment that they were a part of. I mean, well,
I just want to quick pop in and mention on that, because that's such a good point, is keep in mind though, that a lot of times trauma or hard times that we're going through, it is not that it is creating something new or a new problem. It is that it is revealing what was already there.
Right.
So, and I know you're aware of that as it comes through, but I really want to emphasize that is that, a lot of those people that you're mentioning, perhaps until they go to war or until they engage their services, maybe that's something they didn't see as clearly, or right. they didn't recognize. And so again, if we step way back, this is not us judging you guys and what you identify with as trauma, but it is important to get a bigger perspective, because what a lot of people identify as trauma today and do not handle well, they allow it to ruin their lives. And yes, I did say they allow it to ruin their lives, because you have choices you don't realize in your response, is different than what someone might have 50 or 100 years ago.
Sure.
And my only point in saying that is not to put down those of you that are going, I am going through trauma. Don't belittle me. I'm not doing that.
Right.
I want you to understand that a lot of the perspective of it is how we were raised and taught, or what we were no longer allowed to be taught or exposed to. In other words, at a time when life was quote unquote tougher and we weren't as privileged, people taught their children as though life was going to be full of trauma. But right. They didn't necessarily title it that way. They just right. taught them how to be strong, how to endure, how to adapt, how to move on and have a good life despite these things. Right. Whereas now we have people growing up in a society where everything is immediate gratification. It's handed to you. And those people still think, I don't have what I want. I don't have a good life. My life is ruined. I'm going through trauma. And they're really not in compared to people from earlier generations.
Right.
Who every time you had a baby, you could die.
Right.
It wasn't like, oh, you're going to be home in 3 days and with this new baby. People
Right.
assumed maybe you would die.
Right.
So, we've got to really look at that, because it empowers us to say, okay, maybe I can get through times that are traumatizing to me in a way that there is life on the other side, instead of having to go through months or years of anxiety and depression, medication, not being able to hold a job, that type of thing. And
Right.
Chris and I really want to focus on self-empowerment here and standing in your power. So
Mm-hmm.
it is important to at least acknowledge and look at this. I know for me, I don't normally go through trauma, and my March was completely traumatic to me. So, these are things for us to look at and assess. And Chris, your points are so positive and uplifting and broadening. I think it's, the way you approach this is so powerful.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I was actually just talking to a friend of mine from Brazil the other day on this. And she was stating her jobs have sent her all over the world, and she's been to all these different war zones and having all these different experiences. And she said the way that we were raised in Brazil, there's no such thing as trauma. There's challenging times.
Yes.
There's things that happen to us beyond our control, and those are painful experiences, but we don't necessarily have to spend years in counseling or therapy to get through it. And it is interesting to think about. As you said, looking at societal standards, it's like, how do I want to put this? Our generation, saw some level of abuse, but talking to our parents, their level of abuse was a lot higher. Like, I used to get spanked, I used to get hit, I used to get beaten, and but so did my parents. But my parents didn't use a rolling pin, or they didn't use a stick, or didn't use a belt, or whatever. And I think that's part of the progress that we're growing through. It is creating the awareness of how to be a higher vibrational being, and not so much in control of, or I should say, a lack of control based on our belief system, or what we're emotionally reacting to.
Mm-hmm.
And really trying to be more mindful about how we're choosing to affect ourselves and other people. But it's challenging, because it comes down to being really open, really honest, really vulnerable, and knowing that everybody has some level of expectation, whether it's shared or not. And if it's not met, and not discussed, then that can create some residual resentment, and hanging on and stuffing those emotions, hanging on to those stories, all those things, keeps us kind of stuck in a level of identity that takes us away from being responsible for who we are, why we are, what we are, as we move through life.
Yeah, and I think that leads us into choices.
Right.
That really, I mean, this leads us into choices, and this is, I'm just gonna. We all know this, and so I'm just gonna say it blatantly. We are in a world right now where we're supposed to tiptoe around everybody and be careful of what we say. I do not believe that that is empowering. Because again, as a mindset coach, we have choices we don't realize.
Right.
And so we're living in a society where those really running society and really brainwashing everyone want us to be impacted and affected by what is said.
Mm-hmm.
They want us to be offended by one another.
Right.
And so generations are now being raised that you have to be politically correct. You're not allowed to say this and that, to the point where it happens even within families.
Right.
You can't, and the truth is, I mean, can you guys see that as that's happening, it's imprisoning you even more in your mind? It's imprisoning your level of freedom in relationships. It's imprisoning what you're allowed to do at work. I'm not saying it should all be a free for all and everybody can be a nasty shit. But the truth of the matter is you cannot control everyone.
Right.
And so when we raise people to, instead of working on themselves and how they handle it and empowering themselves, using that to empower yourself personally and find better ways of handling things, we instead can go out and sue somebody because, they used the wrong pronoun or they said something else that they shouldn't have. You know what? We're all going to be offended at some point. We are all going to be offended. And when we take away someone else's right to express themselves, we're doing the same thing to those people that before had a freedom to say something. In other words, I make it a point to get on here and talk about these things openly. And if it offends people, I'm not sorry. They can go somewhere else. I'm not trying to be rude and have a nasty attitude. I want people to be empowered and to be aware. Right. And if we cannot discuss these things and we cannot simply, all we're doing here, all I'm doing is saying, take a look at what you identify as trauma. I'm not telling you you don't have trauma. I'm not going against what your therapist has told you, which a lot of them now are identifying things as trauma that they should not be. Because even the Psychological Association of the United States has really been, the American Psychological Association, I believe personally they've been bought off.
Right.
Because now there's not, they're not, instead of helping people work through trauma, a lot of my psychology colleagues are switching their profession because they're not actually allowed to help people. If, it's not all about, guys, it's not all about, oh, everybody's got to feel good. Everybody doesn't have to feel good all the time. And one of the interesting points I think people don't realize is we have a silent subconscious belief that you should feel good 90 to 90% of the time, be happy, and feel bad and be unhappy the other, 5 or 10%. That is not realistic. That is not true. You will feel crappy and shitty or not completely satisfied and happy at least 50% of the time. You will feel blissful maybe 10 to 15% of the time, and you can feel content and happy at peace the rest of that percentage, whatever that is.
Right.
But when and you guys can go into studying, oh my God, subliminal programming, which is just out there everywhere, even if you think you're not being programmed. But our kids are being really taught that, you should be able to be happy all the time. Things should happen instantly. And, if you're not happy 90% of the time, there's something wrong with you in your life. And that's just not true. And then they think they're in trauma all the time. Well, I want to bring this back around and say, is that how you want to live?
Right.
Because this is where people tend to get angry. They don't want to hear they have choices when they're comfortable in a victim comfort zone.
Right.
And what I want to tell you guys is you have a choice. You may not have choices by what you went through and the physiological trauma that you're experiencing, but you have a choice as to what to do with that and how to help your mind and body respond to that in the amount of time it's going to take you with a certain level of suffering.
Right.
That's very different than me saying you haven't had any trauma and get over it. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
I think as adults, since we weren't taught as kids, we now have to work through it and relearn. That's why my clients usually end up working with me at least 2 or 3 years. It is a process. If you did not learn it as a child, how to handle trauma or stop misidentifying things as trauma that really aren't, how to learn to process it in a way that allows you to be functional and happy. And that's at least my priority here today, Chris, is to let people know they have this empowered option. Hi, Natalie. Welcome.
Well, and also, like in cognitive behavior therapy, right? We talk about, what we have control over and what we take responsibility for. And our feelings are our feelings. We have control over that by the way we practice our thoughts, right? And our behaviors. How someone else's thinks and feels is their stuff. So like you said earlier, like you don't want to offend anybody, but if they do, you're welcome. Because there's something that you haven't healed from yet. Like if someone can call you a name and ruin your month, there's definitely some things that we can do within our own life to not be so disempowered by other people. We can thank them for their perspective, their awareness of, how we were out of alignment with how we wanted to be, and take responsibility for the parts that we didn't intend to, because choice always comes with duality, right? The what we expected to happen versus what we didn't expect to happen, the consequences, if you will, and grow through that within ourselves, and then being able to communicate that with one another openly and honestly, I think is the way we maintain our friendships and relationships.
Absolutely. So well, yeah. So this can allow us to, there's a couple things I'd kind of like to summarize here.
Sure.
Not that we're done, but just for everybody who's just joined on or whatever. Number one is, I think we should get into talking about your power of choice. And again, to really hear and be receptive, guys, and learn to do something different here, you have to learn to not take things personally. And our society encourages us to take things personally. But in the end, who does it really hurt? It really hurts you. Mm-hmm. It really hurts the person that is going through whatever they're going through. If one of the first things I find really offends people, especially people that have really gone through a lot of trauma or whatever, or a lot of hard times, is when I tell them that they have choices that they don't believe that they have.
Right.
Because why? The only reason is because it pulls them out of their comfort zone. Mm-hmm. And the only way we get what we quote unquote want or get to a better place is by getting out of our comfort zone.
Right.
And so we have to do that. If we don't do it by choice, life pushes us there. So, it's much better to do it earlier by choice than to wait till something gets to a trauma place.
Right.
Or a very dramatic place.
Right.
And so, these are powerful, why my business is Powerful Choices. These are powerful choices.
Right.
And people don't like that if their comfort zone is where they've been victimized. And you know why? Because then they have to make choices. And everybody's afraid of having to make choices. But understand that your power comes through making choices. And I think the first breakthrough here is getting to a point where you realize you have choices you didn't think you had. Right? You have choices as to, you might not at first be able to choose all your thoughts. You actually can, but you might not be aware of that. But you can choose how you let them affect you.
Right.
And that's a process. You have to learn how to give, nothing has meaning until we give it meaning. You have to learn, okay, why am I upset by this? Oh, it's because the meaning I'm giving it. How can I choose a different meaning? Guys, that is a process that for some of my clients, it sounds ridiculous, but it takes them a year or more. Because you have decades of being trained and taught what certain things mean and how to react and respond. And you're going into the 95% of your mind you are unaware of, And you are becoming the master programmer, which means you have to be self-aware. You have to learn to become aware of what's influencing you. You have to do all that. But
Right.
once you've done it, oh my God. So instead, you can step back and say, okay, yeah, like this past month, I thought, wow, okay, this is traumatic for me. I haven't gone through trauma in a long time. And I was able to pull back and say, okay, so how do I handle that?
Right.
It's not, oh, I'm going through trauma, so this is my excuse to be frozen and not do anything. It's no, okay, I recognize that, but I still have to move on and make choices and take steps, regardless of the label that I'm giving what I'm going through.
Right.
This is the line, my friends, of becoming truly empowered. And you all have a choice as to, what are you identifying as trauma? And then what do you choose to do with that?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what we want to send you off with today.
Right.
If you're sitting there and you're feeling traumatized and helpless and paralyzed and stuck, and believe me, Chris and I have both been there for years on end with no break. But know that there is a choice that you just maybe haven't identified yet. And the more of those choices you identify and act on, the more will be revealed to you and the more empowered you'll become. And it's one little tiny step at a time.
Mm-hmm.
It's not overnight.
No, it's a lifetime process, right? And then once you think, oh, I got this handled, something else comes and shows you a different way to look at it, right? I was sharing with somebody that came down to the sensory deprivation tanks the other day at Think Tank, and we were sharing stories about some things, and I had shared, and I've shared it on the show, about being robbed, and she was like going on like how bad that was, and like, oh my God, and all the things, and I was like, I'm really grateful for it, and she just looked at me with bewilderment, and it was like, it helped me to learn to detach from material stuff. Like,
Yeah.
I was trading my time for things.
Yeah.
And when those got taken without my permission, right? I didn't give them away. It showed me how much I valued stuff over my relationships. And it helped me shift my mindset. And I mean, we all go through whatever. I mean, I shared the story about, being beat up by the cops and, having that involuntary response when I would get pulled over, how I would shake and, all that stuff because of that happening to me as a teenager. But now that I'm where I'm at, like, I can recognize that's a tough job. And they're human, doing the best they can. It's really helped me look beyond how it's myself and look from someone else's perspective, empathy, right? Or of how it affects somebody, And sometimes I think we can get caught up into that too, because most of us don't want to hurt people. And when we do, it can be pretty challenging to forgive ourselves because that wasn't our intention.
But that's one of the things, though, that also happens with, and sorry guys, sorry I've had my camera off, but my dogs have had to go out. I've had to run around. Now I'm going to get coffee, everyone.
All right.
So if I'm a night owl, if we'd be doing this at 2 a.m., I'd be like the first one on here. No, I think that's really important, Chris, because one of the things that happens to us is when we get in trauma, our world shrinks.
Mm-hmm.
We, even if we just have high stress and anxiety, our world shrinks. And so your perspective, you start to get blinders on, right? Think about it. All the people you may be talking to or having fun with or had plans with or were helping, that all falls almost into the blurry wayside. And, at least for me this past month, it was the burning stomach and the pounding heart and the trouble sleeping and the, I literally had 3 hours sleep every night for like a month. I'm a person that needs like 10 hours sleep. So this was not good, so you find the physiological effects. And so you get in survival mode.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very hard to focus on others when you're doing that. And then you're like, oh, okay, I'm back in the world now.
Mm-hmm.
But so that's another reason to identify, like, what do you identify with trauma and how do you handle it?
Right.
And really, maybe a lot of that was maybe you were too stretched too thin in the first place.
Right.
But when we're coming out of that and we're healing, that's when I find it's also very comforting to, and this is not a new concept, guys, of when you're having a hard time focusing on others. I just think there's a level at which we can do that and a level at which we're in survival mode. Mm-hmm. So if you have, let's say, normal anxiety, whatever that is, if you're worried about things about yourself or you're unhappy with life, getting out there and serving others, making that your focus, if you're not in like total survival mode, that's really, really powerful. Mm-hmm. Because that is a totally different thing. That is like a way of life. That's a mode that you're in versus a trauma survival mode. So those are kind of, if you can identify those two separate things. Let's say you're just going about life and you're just kind of unhappy and you're miserable. We're taught in our world today to focus on us. Subconsciously, we are. Mm-hmm. Think about it. All of the propaganda, marketing, and advertising, it's all me first. Mm-hmm. Get what you want. Get something for free. Blah, 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 right? And that is this is the thing you guys have got to remember. It's not in the conscious part of your mind that you are having a conversation in your head about what we're talking about today. It's in the subconscious part of your mind that 95% of your life is coming, or your life is coming from the 95% of your mind you're not aware of. Right. I cannot say this enough.
Well, it's the faster processor, right? It's that.
Well, it's the subconscious mind. It's the part that is making all the choices. So when you are, let's say the 5% of your mind that you're thinking about what you're aware of, that you're responding to Chris and my's conversation here. Wow, these two people really don't know what they're talking about. Or, wow, I love these two. Right. That is all coming from what your subconscious mind has been programmed, has experienced, and believes. So in your subconscious mind, it records everything. It mulls it around with what you believe, and it spits it back out through your subconscious. Thank you guys for your feedback, by the way. We are seeing your comments. The participation means everything, right? Because this is for you guys. But you've got to keep that in mind. That's one of the first things my clients have to focus on. Like, if you're not aware, if you're running on just what you think your conscious thoughts are thinking, you're going to be way off base, because you're going to say, well, every New Year's, this is my goal. And by March, I've failed every year. Well, you know why? Because your subconscious mind has something completely different in mind than what your 5% of your conscious mind says. So what Chris and I are trying to help you guys with here is digging into and pulling up that 95%. That's ultimately what we're doing.
Right.
And this is why when we say it takes our coaching clients a year or 2 or 3, depending on where they start out, this is why. It is a process. So, you have to start with where you are right now. And then there has to be a realistic idea with realistic goals and understanding it's day by day. And then all of a sudden, one day you look back and you're like, oh my God, 6 months ago or a year ago, this would have affected me that much.
Right.
Or I would have really struggled with that. Or I couldn't have told that person no, and I just told him no.
Right.
And it pays off, doesn't it, Chris? It really pays off. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and it's a practice, right? I mean, they say that we can reprogram our subconscious mind with 21 days of effort, right? Or, practice. However, if you're not aware of what you have to let go of and what you have to and what to replace it with, like, it's nearly impossible.
Right. Yeah.
And when we're creating all these stories of, well, this happened to me when I was 2, and this happened to me when I was 5, and this, like, to be aware of that is good, but then to hold anger and resentment and other disempowering thoughts and emotions about it, is what limits us from our potentiality, or I think a lot of people want to go into business for themselves because they think, oh my God, I'm going to have all this level of freedom. And when you start out as self-employed, you realize like how challenging it actually is, because unless you're able to set up the systems and you have employees and you have all that doing the work for you or with you, it all lands on your lap.
Right. Yeah, you have to have more self-control.
Right.
You have to have, better time management. You have to be willing to be that person that, and hi, Anne Swantek, welcome. I'm glad you identify with the power of saying no, Mark. These things are important because all the things like that maybe you had trouble with a regular job, you're going to have 10 times as much issues with working for yourself. You still have to show up. You still have to do your taxes. You still have to handle the money. Only the difference is if somebody's pissed, they're either coming to you or the person you hired.
Right.
If, you're responsible for getting back to everyone. So there's a different level of pressure and self-control there. So I think I don't really like the word realistic, but I have found lately that there are really important places for that. And I believe that, I know I keep going back in time to my grandfather's generation, but it is something that has really been lost the past few generations, is how are we learning in society? Are we being encouraged by, and are we taught growing up the things that are going to serve us to survive and be just survival, meaning have security and live happy, healthy lives. We're not always like, ah. And what I see is we have the opposite. Everyone is frantic. Everyone is caught up in what everyone else is doing, thanks to social media. We have unrealistic ideas of reality. Everything from, Chris, this, everything from the images of models in the magazines where that's not even them. They have been, the pictures have been molded so many times and redone so many times. And I remember as a teenage girl looking at those magazines and thinking, oh my God, their skin was perfect.
Right.
And, it was just like, there's no way. And then I remember working at Abercrombie and Fitch, and it was crazy because I was like, I was fine. I was like 105 pounds, 5'4". I'd been a dancer and a martial artist. Like there was nothing wrong with me. As far as like, I should have been able to walk into there and put on these clothes and be fine. But you know what? I had to get a large or an extra large to fit me. And yet my arms, I don't have big boobs, but I had to wear a large or an extra large long sleeve shirt at Abercrombie. And the sleeves would be this much longer on me because it was made for girls to be like an 8-year-old girl. It was crazy. And I remember a guy coming in and wanting an application, and I went to the back to get one, and the manager said, well, is he hot? And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, well, is he hot? She's like, we can't hire him if he's not hot. And I was like, well, I don't know. I think he's fine. And she's like, well, let me see. And she went and she looked out there and she was like, oh, just tell him we don't have any openings. And I thought, oh. So it was a whole different like reality,
right.
So we need to kind of start being realistic and taking responsibility for that. What was I going to do in that circumstance? I'm not going to change the whole philosophy of Abercrombie. I did end up quitting. I couldn't work for them anymore. I didn't quit that month. I think I looked for another job and quit a couple months later. But my point is that, guys, we're not going to force the world to change overnight.
Right.
But whether we're talking about trauma and how I identify it or not, you need to get to know you, how you function, what levels of things become trauma identification for you, and what you want to allow to stop your life, literally. And you have a choice in that. what you want to put on the brakes and force you to stay home with the curtains closed and not doing anything. And for me, when I struggle, my automatic go-to is I feel better as soon as I take an action. But that's just me.
Right.
Like I can't just close up the curtains and sit in the little corner and cower and say my life is over. That's not me. I immediately want to feel better. So even if it's one step, one choice, one action, I have to know that I'm fixing that and I'm correcting the direction I'm going. But not all of you are that way. So you first need to identify how you handle it in order to know what changes you need to make so that you're suffering less.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it's and from my perspective, or from what my walk, I can say that in a lot of the beginnings of the years that I was doing self-empowerment for myself, or improvement, or however you want to look at it, I was very much in that modality. And this last year, I did take more time to just sit with my feelings, just sit in it, not do much. And it was one of the most challenging things that I've ever gone through, because I couldn't distract myself from myself.
But that's the powerful thing to do.
Right.
Yeah.
And really being in it. And it's, you know, as I'm coming out of that now, I mean, thank goodness for Larkin and all the support that I have in my life that, you know, continue to encourage and inspire and challenge me to, you know, get back up. You know, I'm here, and now I get to, you know, do all the things I love again, doing again. I mean, I was just speaking with a friend last night, and we were talking about why, you know, I got into this industry in the first place. And it was like, because I really love helping people. But I also have to make sure I'm taking care of myself as well. And in my previous life, I wasn't always doing that. I was putting other people's needs, or really wants, above myself. And that brought a level of subconscious suffering, because when things didn't work out, I got blamed for it. And it was like, well, but my intention was to help. And, you know, I did all these things, and I showed up, and, you know, I was there for you. And, you know, now that I'm in this place, like, where are all those people, at to help, you know, me in my time? Where's the reciprocity? Where's the Eine, as they would say in a lot of South American? And it is about reciprocation. It is about give and take. Like, that's wholeness, that's oneness. And when we're always giving, but we're not setting something up to receive as well, our life can fall out of balance pretty easily. Right?
Yeah, I think that's another really important topic. I mean, if you've noticed, all of these things really fit together. And I know one of the things Chris and I want to do, and we'll set that up for this month, is have, you know, like have a day, maybe a Saturday or Sunday or an evening, where we get together and we do like a healing circle or a prayer circle. And, you know, it's important to look at, no matter what it is you're going through, there's the personal internal aspect, and then there's the part in which you interact with the world, who you go to for help and support, you know, who you're surrounding yourself with. I don't want us to hang up here today without mentioning, you know, you are literally the top 5 people you spend time with. Right. So if you have, you know, it's not so much, we're all going to go through trauma. The question is, does your life have a pattern of trauma or disasters or whatever it is that you're struggling with? it's the patterns, because our whole life is habits and repetition. Our whole life becomes a pattern. And we're always creating outcomes that we don't realize through our own habits and repetition.
Mhm.
And so, it may be that even if you're involved in things that maybe it's not your fault that they happen, but you keep ending up having those situations, level of trauma happen. Who do you hang out with? Do you surround yourself with people that are constantly living a life of trauma and survival? Or are you a person that, it hits you every once in a while? I mean, it hits us all at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But if you find that you're surrounded by people who are constantly in survival mode, that is going to come back around at you. So it is very important, even if it's hard to say no and to, reach out, that if you're really ready for a shift and a change, that you look at what are you surrounding yourself in? What are you participating in your life that is playing into the frequency and vibration? Because let's not forget, guys, quantum physics. I mean, all the psychic medium stuff I do, people don't realize it's quantum physics.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's energy. Your thoughts are energy. Your feelings are energy. This isn't ooga booga stuff. Science and spirituality are not mutually exclusive. So what frequency are you existing at every day? And part of that, Chris, I think this is a big pitfall. Part of that is Chris was talking about, like, supporting other people and giving energy to other people and all that. Are you one of those people that's using your empathic abilities and your compassion to just always be around people that are in a constant phase of need and trauma and disaster, and it makes you feel good about yourself to be there and help them and support them? But the real question is, are you enabling them? Are you letting yourself being sucked down?
Right.
Because you feel like you're helping them, or are you really helping them? Because like for a lot of people, I'm too blatant about what I say. I don't sugarcoat my stuff. I used to. Inside, I'm all warm and fuzzy and a total empath. But I have learned that, it attracts different people and different clients. I want the clients that are going to step up for themselves, find their own strength, kick themselves in the ass, and make a difference. And if I sit here and I say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, that hurts. How can I help you?" and that's all I do, that's the mode they're already in. That's where they're going to stay.
Right.
And so you guys need to ask yourself too, like, where are you? This might take you a while to identify, but where are you really helping? And where are you just in a codependent holding pattern with people whose way of life is to always be unhappy and struggle and suffer, because that will keep you there too. If you're helping a person that's drowning and they're going to keep, using your head to keep themselves above water, eventually you're going to drown and sink, and so will they.
Right.
You might have to leave them to struggle and go back and get a raft or another person or a floaty and take the risk of them drowning so you can go back and get more resources.
Right.
And they are not your responsibility. You can help, but they have to want to help themselves. So please keep that in mind.
Like dragging them out of the water and then they keep jumping back into the pool.
Yeah. No, that's right. That's exactly right. I know, Anne says a lot of times I feel stuck and I have to say to myself, why am I stuck? Yes, that is, ask the questions, Anne. Chris and I talked about that in the beginning before you got on. Like the question, I don't know who said this initially. This is over a decade ago. I heard this. Some great teacher was saying this, and it's important. The questions you ask are more important than the answers that you're seeking.
Mm-hmm.
What are you asking? Are you saying, why does this always happen to me? Why do people treat me this way? That's a victim question. This is something in coaching that Chris and I work on that people have to learn. But if you're taught to ask that, and it's been okay to ask that, and you've gotten attention or temporary comfort from asking that, that's what you're going to ask. Instead, ask, yes, what you just said here, Anne, why not why am I stuck, Anne? You need to ask, why do I feel stuck?
Or think I'm stuck.
Yes. Why do I think I'm stuck? Why do I believe I'm stuck? What is belief? Belief is repeated thought. So if you're constantly thinking, I'm stuck, I'm stuck, I'm stuck, I'm stuck, that's a victim place. You feel helpless. It's okay to feel stuck, but understand that feeling stuck doesn't mean you're stuck. You know, I tell friends and family members all the time, I'm saying to them constantly, I acknowledge your feelings. It's okay to feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean it's the ultimate reality. It's your personal emotional reality to feel stuck. But does that dictate the truth? No, doesn't mean you are stuck. It just means you feel stuck.
Right.
And that is like so powerful.
Well, and knowing that you know, we get stuck because there's some kind of uncertainty that we're
Thanks, Mark.
moving through, you know, like, and that's the scariest thing, you know, moving into the void, moving into uncertainty. And I think a lot of us have been conditioned through the years to be afraid of making a misstep or a mistake, but those missteps and mistakes lead to our own wisdom, and how we want to show up, and how we want or would like others to show up, and that allows us to find our tribe. You know, like if we like to go camping and canoeing and being outdoors, I've used this story before, and most of our friends live in the city and have never gone, you know, camping. It can be really uncomfortable because people that have lived, you know, camping and used to sleeping in the dirt or sleeping in a tent, or, you know, collecting water, or, you know, being aware of the food that is all around and abundant in nature, you know, what plants to eat, what mushrooms we can eat, those types of things. We can be in that challenging climate or that area and thrive in that, where somebody that hasn't taken the time to learn those things or experience those things won't have that same ability. And so it's about, like, you know, finding that balance and that homeostasis of saying, you know, I don't want somebody that's going to go camping with me that's going to freak out over every bug, you know, or, you know, like, that's no fun.
I hear you. Oh my God, I hear you.
You know, or, you know, they see a snake and they, you know, they freak out, and it's like, that, just don't go mess with it, and it probably won't mess with you. You know, it's good that you saw it and not stepped on it, because if you step on it, it's probably going to bite you. You know, like, but you're in their habitat too. And you just share space, like, you'll hold space for it, and okay, appreciate that you're there. You just stay over there. And everything's going to be, you know, be fine. And it's being able to recognize that within ourselves, and being able to observe that in others, to know how to hold that space. You know, if someone's never done it before and they want to do it, you know, you can kind of share with them some tips or some insights, or, you know, some things, but at the same time, you're not responsible for their comfort, mentally and emotionally. You know, keep them safe, you know, because that's what we can do, is make sure we're not putting people in dangerous situations.
But I, you know, it reminds me, Chris, that I've always told my clients the whole thing about mistakes is so important, because I've always told my clients, if you're not making mistakes every week when we get on for our session, when we get on for our mastermind, go back and make some. I want you to make mistakes. If you're not making mistakes, you're making me nervous because we're working with you in your life as it's happening. And, you know, a little earlier, I mentioned that nothing has meaning unless you give it meaning.
Mm-hmm.
We are intentionally taught that mistakes are wrong and bad to keep us as a society in line, to keep you afraid, to keep you in a comfort zone. I mean, what better way to keep someone in a comfort zone than to make them afraid of making a mistake?
Right.
F it up, my friends. Screw it up. Make as many mistakes as possible, please, because success comes through making mistakes. I'm going to be total devil's advocate here. Why are we so obsessed with getting everything right and creating success, but we don't want to make mistakes? This is totally backwards of all the greatest minds that ever lived.
Right.
I mean, the greatest minds that ever lived knew and understood, hey, it's okay to make a mistake. They didn't have heartbreak over it.
Right.
Hey, if too many things are perfect too many times at a time, too many times in a row, I'm a little suspicious.
Right.
So make mistakes for yourself, because this is how you become strong and experienced. The only reason Chris and I get the results that we do in helping people transform their lives is because of the mistakes we made. We know others when we know ourselves.
Right.
There's almost nothing that my clients come to me with that I don't already know what that experience is, what the people they're interacting with are doing, and what that means because of the mistakes. So it's okay. I was running a ballet program years back, and the students were, this is when I was grateful I was not a high school teacher with the generation that we have right now. The students were offended and upset when I would teach them how to do like a pirouette. Yes, it's just the regular spin on one leg, for those of you who don't know ballet. I was trying to teach them, and some of them were cheerleaders, and I had some of the Cincinnati Bengals were teaching there as well. And I remember the kids saying to me, we don't like it when you teach us how to do the pirouette. Don't teach us how to do the turns. They're like, the Bengals are they just tell us, just do it. Try it out. Just keep spinning until you get it right. They're like, so can you just do that and not tell us how? These kids are like 9 to 14, and they didn't want me instructing them. And I was like, well, good luck with that. I mean, you could do that for years and still not get it right. And even if you're making the rotation, does that mean it's right? Does that mean you're not going to break an ankle? Right. There is a right way to do it that has been taught for decades, over 100 years, that if I can teach you once or twice and then tweak it, you're going to have it within less than a week versus trying to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
So, you know, guys, make mistakes and make that your priority this week. Not be afraid. You know, so what? So, you know, I make a mistake. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, well, I effed that one up. It's not a big deal to me.
Right.
You know, and when it is something that has bigger consequence, I'm like, wow, yeah, that really sucks. That is really painful. Sit with that pain. Sit with that discomfort. What you accept and surrender to allows you to move forward. Right. When you're honing in on the mistake you made and your regret, that is what will allow you to sit there and rot away in that regret and not see the new opportunities.
Right.
Let's see. Mark says, I do believe not listening is called a life lesson. Yes. yes.
Well, what do they say? You got to be young and dumb to be old and wise.
I think for me, I came the opposite. I was like a really old soul. I was like a little old lady as a little kid. And I think as I'm getting older, I'm acting younger. Like, I don't know. I pull shit now that I didn't pull as a little kid. It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Your cat. Happy birthday to your cat in heaven, Anne. Awesome. April 9th, an Aries cat. Woohoo. I love it. Happy birthday to your cat. Yeah. So guys, this is powerful stuff. And I think, Chris, you want to go to like 1:30, 13 more minutes, and then we'll be good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I want to focus on like, okay, so what and where does the healing aspect fall in here? And then also, what can those of you listening today, even if it's on the rebroadcast, what can you walk away and do? You know, I think a call to action after these broadcasts or after making aha moments or whatever is really important. I see a lot of people too that come to like the readings that I do. They just get on and they go to reader to reader to reader to reader. You know, we get our dopamine fix with, you know, social media here. And it gives people immediate gratification and relief from whatever they're suffering from. But what you do in private alone when you get off of these things, what you do with the information that is shared or how you relate to what we're saying, if you really want a change in your reality, that is what counts. That is what matters. You have to do the tough work alone, or if you have a good coach or a counselor. But ultimately, when you're alone at night, when you turn that social media off, when you're done with that therapy or coaching session, it's what you do in here and on your own that little by little will transform your life into a completely different reality. And there are years worth of many days and nights that whenever I was alone, I was crying my eyes out. I was working on my journal. I was learning what I could, and not just learning it, but implementing it. And my life is so different than it was 20 years ago. It's ridiculous. But if I had not done that work and been motivated enough to do it, motivation doesn't last, guys. I mean, that, like I said, that's just my nature. That's why my way of healing my pain and discomfort. But if that's not your nature, you might have to find another way. If I hadn't done that, I would be right now exactly where I was 20 years ago. And I see that in people all the time. Decades go by and they suffer the same pattern. And just because you age and life changes doesn't mean you change. That's up to you. Yeah, it's really important. Anne says, I take it day by day and I know God and Jesus are with me and love me. Absolutely. Now the question beyond that, Anne, is knowing that is good, but then what are you going to do differently? If there is something you want to change and do differently, right? And Mark says, there's no way to heal unless you implement. Yeah. I mean, the healing is up to you. And let me again be devil's advocate here. I did this the other day on my readings too. What is healing? Chris might smack me for this, but I'm just going to say this just to shake everybody's way of looking at this up. Why do we need to heal? What is healing? Again, it's sort of an identification as we have with, with trauma. Mm-hmm. In the old days, in the old ways, depending on the culture, just like Chris was talking about his friend in Brazil, healing was just another way of life. It was just another aspect of handling what you went through. It's how it was. Yeah. And healing was an automatic and assumed part of the process as we move on with life. One of the reasons people don't heal is because they're so caught up in the healing, because it's another modality for the ego to use as a way of keeping you where you are, that they get caught up in the healing and they don't ever heal. One of the ways to heal is to serve others, to stop focusing on needing to heal and to just move on. Another way is to focus on loving. And, when I was in some of my greatest trauma, that's when I started my journal of, I was going to bring forth the healer in me. And my phrase and my mode for the day, let me to be a vehicle of love, light, and healing. And it became my obsession. When I wasn't working, when I wasn't crying, when I wasn't focusing on my own trauma, I would take that traumatic energy I had, and I had been through a lot of trauma, and I went and I was praying for others. And I literally was praying for I'd focus on 10 people and animals a day. And I ended up with this thick journal where I had prayed thousands of times, given healing blessings to others that I wasn't even around, that I didn't even see. And what started to happen was I started to be able to be a healer for others. It wasn't me. I became that vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
And it was amazing, because I had heard somewhere that this guy became a healer after he had done 10,000 healings, or attempted to. It's a way of channeling and focusing your intention.
Mm-hmm.
By the time I was done with that experiment, I was a different person. I was healed from things. I wasn't focusing on healing myself. I don't even remember trying to heal myself. I do not have a victim mentality. So I literally don't think, oh, I need to heal from this. I'm just like, oh, yes, that sucks. I've had trauma. I'm moving right along. What can I do for somebody? That's my attitude. So I didn't realize when I did this journaling experiment that I was literally going to have the ability or be this vehicle of healing, and the difference that it made for people, whether it was mental or emotional. So the best way is become that vehicle of love, light, and healing. And what you'll find is your identification with healing becomes something different, because especially with women, this happens because there's a lot of money right now being made in reeling women in for healing. Oh, this is how you heal. Work 3 hours a week so that you have time to heal your as women, we need to heal. Okay, yeah, we do. But don't stop your life because of it. So what we need to watch out for is, if you identify a certain way and too closely with needing to heal, what are you actually saying? You're actually saying there's something wrong with me. Things have happened to me. I am a victim. So now Chris might have a different way that he's already worked with identifying that as something different for people. But in general, when people come and they're like, oh, I need healing, what they're really believing subconsciously is, there's something wrong with me. I need to be fixed. I was a victim. Things happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to re-identify. I mean, check in with yourselves, guys. What is your belief and your attitude with healing? Is it something that you're going to do for decades? Or is it something that you're not allowing to stop in your life? Can you sit down and cry for half an hour and nurture and take care of yourself and then move on? Or does it make you dysfunctional? And I'm not putting anybody's way down. I just want to throw all these contradictions out there to mix it up for you guys, because I think we have a very marketed belief system of healing. And I think if you join Chris's and my prayer group and in the healing circles that we're going to start, you're going to see that we give you a very different perspective and a healthy, empowered perspective on healing. I know Chris really focuses on empowering people through their healing process, instead of it being oh, I need to be healed. He helps you to step into that power.
Yeah, it's about feeling better, right? And finding acceptance at what's happened, and using it as leverage, if you will, to go beyond what happened before. It's about
the past. Mark just said.
Yeah, well, Anne said, let go of the past.
That too, yeah.
Yeah.
They both did. Yay, guys.
Yeah. And it is about realizing that we're always in the now. So what happened, and you can't change it. But when we find acceptance through awareness, through these different modalities and techniques, I mean, having a massage is going to help heal you in ways. Getting energy healing is going to help you in ways. Talking it out with somebody is going to help shift things in different ways. So there's not one right way to do it. And it happens naturally, but like Mark said on this, you have to implement something. You have to show up. You can't just keep going to ceremony after ceremony, or keep buying crystals thinking that these crystals are going to solve your problems. They don't work that way. And realizing that where we are in this moment, and I agree with you, Mark, where we are in this moment creates our future. So, once we identify, hey, we have a lack of limitation in our life, here's a strategy to move through that. In the future, it's not going to be a problem anymore. We're multi-dimensional beings. We're supposed to have multi-dimensional emotions. We're supposed to have multi-dimensional thoughts, on the spectrum, however you want to quantify it. That is oneness. That is wholeness. And what keeps us disempowered, what keeps us in victim mentality, what keeps us in lack and, all that is saying that wasn't supposed to happen. Well, if it wasn't supposed to happen, it wouldn't have. Now that it did, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to be about it? Are you going to learn your lessons? If people are the pattern of people use you and abuse you, and you just continue to allow it, not stand up for yourself, not hold people accountable for what they said they were going to do, whatever it might be, every circumstance is unique. But that's how you shift it. Even sometimes, stopping doing what you're doing or reaching out to somebody, what happens with that? Time goes by and they're like, man, I really miss this person in my life. They were taking you for granted because you were so consistent in their life. They didn't realize the value and the energy that you were helping them through in their life with, and by pulling yourself out of that circumstance for a little bit, they have the opportunity to see your value, to see your worth, and appreciate when you are there. And that's part of the detachment process, I think, is appreciating people and places and experiences for what they are when they are. And then when it no longer is working anymore, you have to just let it go in however way you have to let it go. I want to stop smoking cigarettes. That's one of my things. So what do I have to do? I have to find habits or things in my daily life that replace me sitting around smoking cigarettes. And then that addiction takes care of itself. By making the cigarette more powerful, or the nicotine or the habit, I enjoy smoking. I spent time with my cousins this weekend, and she's also a healer. It's been totally crazy because I've been the black sheep of the family for a lot of years, but things have shifted. And we sat down and had a smoke together, like in the evening after dinner, and she's like, I enjoy smoking. I don't want to be addicted to smoking though. So I have control over when I choose to have a cigarette and when not to. Like, I don't fiend for one. I don't have, she is truly healed in a lot of ways, where she's making an empowered choice of, I enjoy doing this and it doesn't have control over me. And I think that's true empowerment, is realizing that we have choice, that we have ways to move our mind, emotions, energy and motion, and move through these things with consistency. Because the consistency of energy, we light our houses with consistent energy. If energy wasn't coming to our house consistently, we would have blackouts or brownouts or whatever. It has to be a consistent flow. And that's part of our presence as being a human being, is being consistent with ourselves, for ourselves, and the well-being of other people and the planet. Because we can't forget the planet. Because I think the purpose here on life is to be caregivers to our environment, to our nature, to our planet, because in 7 generations, no one's going to remember who I am. And that's okay. But the effect that I had here while I was living here could residually affect 7 generations from now.
Absolutely. I think there's so much, Chris, in what you just shared that I could literally go on for like 8 hours, because it's important. I mean, what Chris and I, it's like, and you can feel the passion in our voices, because what we're sharing is backed by decades of experience and coaching. I mean, I've been coaching for almost 20 years now. And whatever it is we've learned that we're sharing, and memories of clients and people that have worked through these things. And so on these podcasts, we're really only giving you little tiny summaries of things, right? And it's like, like I see Mark says here, what's your intent to move forward or stay in the swamp? Yes, intention is important. That's something we all talk about in coaching and get into in depth. That is important. Being in the now and the present, and focusing on her family. Yeah, it doesn't, we want to stay in our own lane. It doesn't matter what family does. You're not going to change your whole family, but you can change yourself and your perspectives and the way you handle things to a point where it doesn't matter. You can still even spend time with family.
Right.
I mean, I'm not very affected by the people I surround myself with or I walk into in an environment, because I know myself and I'm in my center. So it really doesn't matter who they are or what they do. I can still be happy and at peace and content and even enjoy them. But that is coming from a very empowered place. And that was not always the case. There's a lot of work that goes into that. So, in summary, as Chris is talking about the now, that's really, I mean, I focus on that a lot. This is why all my clients have to read Eckhart Tolle. Healing doesn't actually have to happen, because you really are you're already perfect as a being, as a non-physical being that can permeate through into your physical self. The only thing that ever blocks that and gets in the way of that is your ego, is your mind. So really, healing is simply a level of awareness and getting free of the mind,
Right.
because it then affects the body. But that's kind of, I mean, that sounds like, what, to people that don't know what I'm talking about here, but that's essentially what it is.
Right.
I don't remember her name. I can never say it. If you look at Eckhart Tolle's wife, she became a student of his years ago. But she was diagnosed with, I mean, she had like 5 or 6 psychological disorders. She was schizophrenic. She had severe manic depression. She had, what was she? She was, I don't know if she had borderline personality disorder. She had all sorts, I mean, serious things that you just don't ever recover from. And she became one of his students when he was still doing like small, intense groups. She took herself, I mean, she's off all of her medication. She's fine. She's a spiritual teacher now. She has been for over a decade.
Right.
Because she learned the power of now. And when you do that, you exit from you stop being ruled by your mind and you start using your mind as a tool, because all psychological and emotional disorders and issues come from the egoic mind. Mm-hmm. So when I'm doing my coaching with my clients, that is always the pathway. And depending on the level they want to take it to, depending on how committed they are to themselves, depending on whether they book out in 6 months or they stay for 3 years because they see their life transforming. You don't see that at first, guys. The first 6 months to a year of coaching, my clients don't usually see it. I see their progress. They usually don't.
Right.
Because they're inside. They usually stay with me because they're desperate. It's after they get out that first year, they're like, oh my God, I'm a totally different person. This and that doesn't bother me anymore.
Right.
And Chris and I with the clients we work with. We have to be willing and ready to let clients go just when they're making that peak and they decide to cop out. And that's heartbreaking. You know, they remove themselves because that ego still has a grip on them.
Right.
Those that stay are like, oh my God, like, thank God I stayed.
Mm-hmm.
And it has nothing to do with me or Chris or anything like that. It has to do with the process. And most coaching programs don't take you through that process. Most therapy and counseling programs don't.
Right.
They pull you in, they try to get your money, and they teach you a carbon copy process. It's not how it works. It has to be your process from the inside out.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, healing actually comes from learning to be present. That's what it actually comes from. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, take that with a grain of salt. Go get yourself the Power of Now or Stillness Speaks book. You know, it doesn't matter where you start, but you have to start from where you are right now. Mm-hmm. And you have to accept where you are now. And from there on, guys, anything is possible for you.
Right.
And yes, you have to train. And so Anne says you got to train your mind to heal. Yes and no. That's what you're thinking right now. But what it really is you, as the observer behind your thoughts, have to learn to be aware that all of your life experiences are just being filtered through your mind. And you have to learn to be aware of your mind and your thoughts, number one. Number two, harness the power of your mind as a tool. Learn to use your mind as a tool. And then you can get your mind to work for you. But without those first steps, without acknowledging, yes, my thoughts are a choice. Yes, my emotions are the mind and the body, and learning what that means. Without being able to do that, you got to start with awareness. I mean, there is a process to it. Mm-hmm. And you have to learn to be the observer behind your thoughts, not your thoughts. And everything. And what?
Not being attached to them. Just because you have a thought doesn't mean you have to react or, you know, identify with it.
And that helps that. And then Chris was talking about story earlier. So this takes you to a level of freedom where you can become unattached to your story. And believe me, everything is attachment to your story. Your whole identity is attached. You know, your identity is a story, which is why every time we get out of our comfort zone, we have to let go of an old version of us and our place in the world. And this is the pain. When we lose someone and we're mourning someone, this is what we're mourning, is a death of an aspect of our own identity. That's what we're really mourning. But that's a whole nother deep conversation. Here's the irony I want to leave you guys with, at least from what I'm sharing today. The irony is, guys, healing, we think healing is healing from what has happened to us and what we're going through. That's not what healing is. Healing is actually the healing of, this is why you never really need to heal. Healing is actually getting over the story that shifted who you identify that you are. So every time something happens you think you have to heal from, it has been part of your identity dying. All that ever needs to heal is your ego. So when we talk about healing, it's just our ego saying, oh, I've been hurt, I've been damaged, I need to heal from this. Yeah, that's all ego. You know why? Because the true you, the observer behind your thoughts that actually is meant to be in charge of your mind, can never be hurt. It is eternally perfect. Nothing can ever happen to you. Something can only happen to your body and your ego. Right. And your body is the physical manifested aspect of your ego. So just keep that in mind when we're talking about healing. What we're really looking for is a satisfaction to our ego. It's just that it feels like pain. It feels worse because it's ego identified. We're not actually ever wounded. So it's easy for me to say, if you guys don't actually know firsthand what we're talking about, that might seem a little, but just understand that in an infinity of dots, we know less than one dot. Right. And that's Chris and I included. So
Yeah.
you are, whatever doesn't make sense to you today, or you don't like the sound of, it's because it's unfamiliar and it's new. And as you move forward with it and you become more aware of it, you're going to be like, oh, and that's what kept me going through all my trauma and hard times, was the more I learned something new and became more aware, the more that sucked me right out of my pain and suffering.
Right. But I also think, well, it depends on how we're looking, right? Because if we look externally, that's gaining a level of awareness too, and we can see all the, pain and that humanity causes, the suffering, the destruction of our environments, all those things. Yeah. But it's really looking within, and learning. I mean, I think that's why Think and Grow Rich was such a great book, right? Because it showed all the pain stories of people who went through what they went through, and then it gave examples of resilience, of perseverance, of all those things. And so we could keep those in our mind as we're going through our own experiences of like, I don't want to stop 5 feet from hitting the gold line, the gold vein, in the one story. So, Larkin's walking away. Already I love the fact that we've
all right. I was trying to find where my husband went. Guys, I'm sorry I was so distracted on here.
You want to wrap up?
Yeah, and I want to
because I mean, I love this. Getting a chance to chat with you again has been well,
we have a lot more that we're going to be doing. I had to move 4 horses, guys, quickly. It is not cheap. It is not stressful. They're all traumatized. It is not easy to find a place where you can put 4 horses that is acceptable, or nice. It's hard. It's hard work. But one of the things I want to share and invite with you guys too is, what I find when I do readings is that almost everyone that comes and wants or needs a reading, what they really need is mindset work. I went from making over $100,000 a month to making almost nothing because I did not agree with the coaching industry and all the things I had learned and taught, even though what I was teaching was authentic. Chris and I both try to make things so affordable, and we do so much free stuff. We still need to put food on our table and take care of the charity things and that we do, that we have promised. And so unfortunately, we do have to charge for things. And I don't have a problem with that, honestly, because everything is an energy exchange. And I do find that the people I give things away to for free end up not committing to themselves, not following through. There really is something to people having to pay and invest in themselves. The money has to go somewhere. That energy has to go somewhere. So both Chris and I have free things and then different levels of things in which you guys can engage in. If you want to do things more deeply, or maybe you don't even want to work with us, there's someone else you want to work with that is going to work with you on mindset stuff on a consistent, because your life is habits and repetition, on a consistent basis. That means working with you in your life as shit hits the fan, helping you work through that process. That's how my clients have gotten success. We work through it when shit is hitting the fan in their lives, not as something separate that they have to replicate, but while it's happening. This is really important. And if you guys can find someone, us or someone else to work with that will help you do that. Because when you walk back out in the world, you're sucked back into the old ways of doing things, the way everybody else did things, the way you're used to doing things. If you have like a mastermind group or something like that, that you can come back to every week, ask questions, get support with, be around other people going through the same stuff, it will make the world of difference in your life. So, I always want to invite people to do that. it is very important, and it's important that you guys walk off with those call to actions, both from us and for yourself. So I want to thank you all for tuning in, and thank Chris. We will be posting the things we're going to have coming up. Please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube page and invite people. We're going to have some fun things where if you guys bring people to join us, you know, you can, I don't know, we'll have a raffle or something fun to thank you all for doing that. Chris, what else? What else do you have to share? Anything else fun to leave them with?
Oh man, so many good things that we've already shared, and I know we could go on for another 10 hours.
Hey, I got the strongest coffee mixed with mushroom coffee and a Coke here.
Yeah,
I'm ready to go.
Yeah. I had some coffee before getting on, and now I'm working on my water to keep it in check, so I don't dehydrate myself. But no, I think this is it, and I challenge it in so many ways people to really look at where they've gone in their life and what they continue to project onto themselves and other people that keep them in the repetitive pain stories, and to when you feel like you're stuck, or the repetitive thoughts, or all those ruminations and whatever, to seek outside influence, so it's not just you banging your head up against the wall going, well, one day I'm going to stop doing this. Having an outside perspective, having somebody ask you the question, like, why are you continuing to do this, and actually having to get honest with not only yourself but somebody else to kind of hold you accountable, is good healing. And so it is challenging, Larkin, to call, for me to call myself a healer, because I just hold space. Healing naturally happens. It's through the process, the intention of starting a process and then following the process that allows it to
we don't like labels. The labels are just for you guys so that people can find us online and go, oh, I identify with that. But once you guys get in with us, like, it's beyond the labels.
Right.
And that's where real work happens.
Yeah. I mean, if we were born in Japan, the labels we'd use are completely different. But
Absolutely.
the frequency, the energy behind the label is part of the communication as well. So don't get so caught up on the label, like this means this. Yeah. I mean, that keeps us divided. The reason what I believe we're all moving away from organized religions, and creating more of spiritual practices, is the fact that there isn't we don't live in a bubble.
Right.
And we need to be adaptable. And I think that's where spirituality can come into play, as long as we're not too identified in our spiritual path or our spiritual walk of this is, because that will create stagnation as well.
Yeah, we have enough to use it to validate and verify what you're doing, but not enough that it is, like Chris said, that you're getting caught up in the label. That's what's really, really important. I mean, for me, I use a lot of these things as ways of verifying or validating, because as a human being, we have to use words. We have to use labels and titles to understand. When I'm doing a reading, unfortunately, what's really coming through is beyond words. And what I'm being shown, even when I have to describe a necklace or a dress or how the spirit that's coming into me is looking, it feels so insignificant compared to what I'm experiencing. But we have to, because we have to be able to connect with other human beings.
Right.
So, I think what would be great for Chris and I, as we start putting together some events and things, is, because we want to put together some things too, where we can do some things that are very affordable to everybody, but you guys can come and really learn something, whether it's in person or online. Share in the comments, like, Yeah, I would like a whole workshop on this or on that, because we're going to be putting things together, books, curriculum, events, things like that. And that way it can serve you guys. And we're trying to do it at a really authentic level. We're authentic about what we're doing, but the question is, how do we put out that beacon to show people that it is truly authentic? And what is authenticity? Right. Versus a lot of what you see out there that has millions of dollars that market and suck people in all the time. You know, the now is the most powerful place to manifest. And as Chris was talking about, when you're too caught up in the future or you're too caught up in the past, you can't create a different future if you're so busy talking about the past. You know, what your family's doing, the person you lost, how things used to be. Well, you will create in your future what you're feeling and thinking about right now. So if you, in 30 years, you can be just as miserable about your past if you don't get out of the past, right. You know? So there's a zillion things that we could talk about, but the bottom line is it comes down to learning to be present, learning to be aware of your mind, remembering who you are, and learning how to step into your power. And I could label those, I could have titled them 4 different things, but that's the bottom line. So, you know, it's about practicing those simple principles, and we want to simplify it for you. We don't want to make it more complicated, but do share with us in the comments what you guys would love to see or have us do workshops and seminars on, or
even shows.
Yeah,
you know, shows and things to talk about, you know, because
or books or T-shirts or anything that would help and support you.
Yeah, right. Ceremonies or whatever.
Just make sure it's fun for us.
Yeah. Well, we get to do what we love to do, so it's like woo, even better. So thanks so much, Larkin. Thank you everybody that's tuned in today. And hung in there with us. I mean,
even on the rebroadcast.
Yeah, and thanks for all the people that watch the rebroadcast, share, like, all those things, because it helps us, it helps us help other people as well. And that's part of the energy exchange, right? Like you and I can't market and share all this stuff proficiently. It takes community to do that. The more we participate together, the greater our results together. It's the law of large numbers.
Yeah. So. Yeah, that's how we enhance the world, guys. It starts with you. It starts with you and not trying to make everybody else do what we think they should. It starts with how you transform yourself and the space that you end up holding for others.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you do it. So, and as the Maharishi has said, 100 empowered people that are standing in their power, that are conscious, is more powerful than 10,000 who are not. All we need is 100 people.
Right.
Time. So, all right, guys. Thank you, Chris. Thanks for being patient with me. And
of course. Thank you for the practice. Love you, everybody. Much love and gratitude. And we'll see you next week.
All right. See you next week. Bye, guys.